35 and 38, like all of you. You know, last night at the Roanoke Tavern, my secret sort of leaked out that I was a budding politician because of the all these conspicuous signs on my car. And one of you had the audacity to approach me and say, "Bruce, you're running for what? Aren't you too young to run for that?" And I looked at her and I reminded her that Dan Quayle was elected to the United States Senate when he was 1 year younger than you and me, which just goes to show that you can be neither too young nor too dumb to be elected to the second highest office in the land. And I guess it also goes to show that in America, any handicap can be overcome with hard work, good looks, and family money. But folks, I have news for you. Being too young is no excuse anymore. The only thing that you and I are too young for is to collect Social Security and Medicaid. And I might add that 3 of you on the answers to your questionnaires under occupation listed that you were retired. But look around you. Did everybody turn out just as you thought they would? You know, when you look at what life looked like when we were 18 years old, and you all thought that you could, can people in the back hear me? Can you? Okay, all right. When you look at what life looked like when you were 18 years old and you thought you could figure out what was going to happen, I'm reminded of what Yogi Berra said, which is that a person should be very careful about making predictions, especially about the future. Of course, everyone has told me that they always knew I'd be running for political office, to which my response has been, well, then why did I wait 20 years if you were so certain about that? And I've decided after I talked to Gary Macklis this evening that the reason I waited 20 years was the fear of losing, because the last thing I was ever elected was the senior class president. But just to set the record straight, I want to make it clear that I had nothing to do with organizing this event tonight, and the full credit should go to Ron Cohn and Linny Siegel. And I think we should all join me in giving them a hand, because they did a lot of work to make this happen. Well, there's 2 things I'm supposed to do in a few minutes up here. I'm supposed to join you in a look back at the past, to share with you some of the things that made 1969 a pretty special year. And then I also want to talk to you about all of you and some of the things that you've been doing and some of the distinctions that you've attained. 1969 was a pretty amazing year. About 4 months after we graduated from high school, a city in New York was born. It was called Woodstock, and it was called the Woodstock Nation. 1969 was the year that Neil Armstrong walked on the moon, and 1969 was the first year that Richard Nixon became the 36th President of the United States, and Spiro Agnew became the Vice President of the United States. And 1969 was definitely a high water mark in our culture, because 1969 was the year of Easy Rider. Remember Easy Rider, huh? The Fondas? Midnight Cowboy, and Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. But television was still kind of stuck back there, because the leading television shows in 1969, and nobody here can deny that you watched them, were Gunsmoke, Bonanza, and Laugh-In. But you know, 1969 was also a time when the average working person could still afford a house and a car, because you could buy, not that any of us had the money for either of those 2 things, but you could still buy a new house in West Seattle with 3 bedrooms for the grand sum of $16,000. And there's a fellow out there who says he still bought 20 of them, so he must definitely win the smartest person in the class award. 69 was a big year in sports. Remember Joe Namath? 1969 was the year that Joe Namath and the New York Jets beat the Baltimore Colts, and Joe Namath became a legend. 1969 was the year of the Jets and the Mets, as Tom Seaver led the Mets to the winning of the World Series over the Orioles. And of course, who could forget that 1969 was a high water mark for both the Vietnam War and the Beatles, which I think are the two most significant things that happened to us in our generation. Well, let me talk to you a little bit about some of your colleagues, your schoolmates, your classmates, and what has become of them. The award tonight for the Mercer Island graduate who came the furthest to celebrate this momentous occasion goes to Kay Spickard, who came all the way from Gstaad, Switzerland. Now that is real dedication. The person with the most kids, Heidi Little, who of course is home taking care of them, all 7 of them. The people with the oldest children that we know of, that is the people with the oldest acknowledged children, are Carl Meyersham and Donna Hammond, who have an 18-year-old daughter and a son. And check this one. The award for the person with the youngest child is in extremely heavy competition, as Teresa Rand at this moment is in labor with her first child. Teresa Rand had an aversion for boys that she finally got over last year. And if the baby makes it in the next hour and 45 minutes, that will be the person with the youngest child. For some reason that I don't understand, I have not given out the award for who has had the happiest and the most frequent marriage. One more thing, and that is that according to the information that was given on the questionnaires, there's not a person in this room who admits to being a grandparent. As far as occupations go, some of the more interesting occupations, other than your average 2-bit lawyer and politician, such as your senior class president, are Jay Adelet, a computer nerd, Bob Dressel, who owns a Christmas tree farm, so if you see Dressel, you can get your order in now. Pat Fay, who leads a double life as a heavy metal rocker and an engineer. Liz Garrett, who proudly describes herself as a super mom. And Sue Swisher, who says that she is an industrial hygienist, whatever that means. I also happen to know that I ran into Gigi Coe about 10 years ago, at which time she was working for Jerry Brown. Remember Governor Moonbeam down in California? Linda Ronstadt as the almost First Lady. And Gigi's title in Governor Brown's office was, this is a fact, I'm not making this up, the Assistant Director of Alternative Technology. Now there's one person that I happen to know personally who didn't come here and didn't provide any information, and I can't tell you his name for the fear of, because I know something about the law of slander. This particular person was known at Mercer Island High School for being rather disoriented and having bloodshot eyes and generally sort of walking around in a fog. In fact, at one point I'm told that even though our high school was shaped like an M, he needed a map to get from one class to another. And at any rate, this person recently became employed in another part of the state of Washington as, get this, an anesthesiologist. At a salary that is obscene, that I will not repeat. On a more serious note, I would like to read, in order to honor and to share a moment of silence, which I hope you'll all join with me in, your classmates who are no longer with us. If I could read that list: Steve Brown, Dale Cole, Brad Graham, who is the only person we know of from our class who died in Vietnam, Joe Klink, Kathy Christofferson, Craig Lindenberger, Janice Orr, Radke, Stephen Ross, John Spearman, and John Halverson. Would you join with me, please, in giving just a moment of silence to pay tribute to those people? There are two announcements that I need to make. One is a short-term announcement and one is a long-term announcement. The short-term announcement is the picnic tomorrow is at Groveland Park, not Luther Burbank Park, at Groveland Park. And the second announcement, pay attention, write this down on your calendars. Your 25th reunion, for those of you who expect to live another 5 years, will be held the same Saturday as this, which is the first Saturday after Seafair Week, at the Roanoke Tavern. And you may not get any other notification of this, so you heard it here first. Write it down or remember it. The one thing I cannot explain to you is why I cannot announce for you the location of your 50th high school reunion. Come on, Ron and Lenny, get with it. In closing, let me just encourage you to renew as many friendships as you can tonight. Talk to as many old friends as you have time for, because, my friends, you don't have any young friends anymore. And let's all rejoice together at what statistically looks like the halfway point in our lives, except for the women, who statistically will probably live beyond 80, which I think is extremely unfair and sexist. But I think it's a good time for all of us to rejoice at everything that we've had a chance to do in our lives, and if I may be philosophical for just one brief moment, to take a pledge to redo everything that you've wanted to do and make sure you find time to fit in everything. Because if there's one thing I've learned, it is that the second half goes a lot faster than the first half. That concludes this portion of the program, except that the picture man, Wally Kemp, is now going to ask all of you to somehow try to look presentable again, sort of straighten your ties. This is one for the history books. And thank you very much for the...